Today's scripture reading is Matthew 11:28 through 30. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light.
Good to see everybody here today. As we continue on talking about discovering our purpose, as I mentioned last week in my long introduction, that really discovering our purpose is a lifelong pursuit of figuring out what is the cross we're going to carry each day. It changes throughout our life from when we're young to when we're old. And in different times, in different places, we have different abilities, different opportunities, different responsibilities. But it's upon us to take that yoke. As he says here in this passage, this was one of my favorite passages when I was a new Christian. It really kind of spoke to me, especially in the early part here, when he talked about coming to him if we are laboring and heavy laden. If we just feel like things are burdening us and we are stressed, don't really know where to go, don't know how to, find relief and peace and joy. And he says, you can come to me and I'll give you rest. And that rest, which doesn't mean do nothing, by the way, it simply means that I have a chance to breathe and to lay aside, burdens and lay aside the struggles and the anxieties and the worries. But he also then said, take my yoke upon you. Now if you notice in that sentence or that part of that sentence that he is not forcing his yoke on us. He says, I need to take it and I need to put it on. And a yoke is typically put on a beast of burden to pull some kind of weight for its owners. And normally, as with cattle or horses or anything that are yoked up, they don't really have a choice in the matter. The yoke is put upon them. But God didn't do that to us. In fact, He very clearly has told us that I can, if I decide to, I can refuse it. And there's consequences to that choice that I don't think any of us will look forward to or enjoy. But He gave me the option to hear Him, to listen to Him, to take the yoke, which means there's some work to do. And I can put it upon myself. And I can then learn from Him what that work is. And that's what we're trying to do in discovering purpose, discovering our cross. And he says, I'm gentle and I'm lowly in heart. He didn't puff himself up. He didn't make himself great. He came into this world humble. And he was quiet. He was gentle. He was truthful, he was powerful, but that truth, that gentleness, that humility or humbleness, it changed the world. And in Him we find rest for our souls. And he says, my yoke is easy. Essentially, if you picture yourself putting a yoke around your neck, very often a yoke can chafe, make things hard, can make it, can irritate. He says, no, my yoke won't do that to you. My yoke is not designed to make your life difficult. It's something that you can do. It's something you can manage. And he says, and the burden, that which I'm asking you to pull, the work I'm asking you to do, is not too much for you. And that's really important Because as I talked about in all the different times of life, the amount of work we can do and the ability of what we are able to do changes throughout our life. When we're young, our ability to carry and work might be limited. And then we grow and we become adults and we get stronger, and then we get wiser, and then even as we get wiser, we get weaker. And sometimes we can't carry as much. And sometimes we need others to help carry things for us. And so all through our lives, the yoke might change, the work might change, but it's always something we can manage. He's never asking from us that which we are incapable. And so discovering our purpose is kind of based upon the passage, a number of passages in Luke 4, John 18, John 12 there, where Jesus talked about how he had to fulfill his purpose. In Luke 4, the city he had performed miracles in and preached to is asking him to just stay. He says, I can't stay. I've got to go and preach the gospel in all the other cities as well. And Pilate, asked him if he really was a king. And he says he was born for this, and he says his purpose was to testify of the truth. He also said in John 12 his purpose was to be lifted up, to be crucified for all of us, making the payment that would redeem us from our debt. He then told all those who would listen, all those around him and all those who would hear him through his word. He said, my sheep hear me and they follow me. He says, you need to follow me and you'll be where I am. And you need to pick up your cross every day. Now, when he said that, I can't imagine they had any idea what that meant. Because I don't think any of them knew he was going to be nailed to one. And the idea of a cross being something you would carry on a regular basis, I don't know that anybody would have understood it at the time. But after his crucifixion and after his resurrection, as he explained to his disciples and apostles and opened their understanding of Scripture, I think they began to understand. We're here to serve. We're here to take his yoke, put it upon ourselves, that we might go to work. Not to help me, not to earn anything that I can earn, but that I can serve him because of what he has done for me. He has given to me so much that I can never repay, but I can walk worthy of the calling with which he called us. And that's what we talked about a little bit a couple of weeks ago, Ephesians chapter 4. Walking worthy of the calling, learning to serve others. That passage in that whole section is telling us all of the servants, all of the leaders, all the teachers of the church are there to help every one of us learn how to serve, how to minister to others. That's our purpose as a congregation. And Ephesians 2, he talked about that we were created for the good works that he teaches us. And he has been teaching from the very beginning. We talked about last week, Galatians 6, fulfilling the law of Christ. As we talked about there in Matthew 11, that he has given us a burden, and it's a burden that's not too heavy, that it's light. I can carry it. Where Galatians 6, he's telling us and urging us to fulfill the real principles of Christ. And that is when others are carrying a burden that is too heavy for them, that I need to help them to bear that burden. Because the word there in Galatians 6 talking about the burden is something that has become too heavy. I'm struggling to carry. And so I need some help. He mentions in that same passage that each of us are going to carry our own load. And that's a different word, and that's actually something I'm able to do. I need to do what I'm able, but I also need to be ready to help others who are burdened beyond their capabilities. And so, discovering our purpose. And so that's where we left off, and we're going to pick up from there. And I want to kind of start with this passage. I'll get there. Come on. The tablet does not want any. There we go. Finally. In Ecclesiastes chapter 2, 22, he says, "What has a man from all the toil and striving of heart with which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even in the night his heart does not rest. This also is vanity." And so he's talking about just how we strive and how we toil in life under the sun. And that's true. When he created us in this flesh, he created us to toil and to work. And that work often stresses us. It's like vexes us, causes us to have no rest. And this is a vanity. This is worthless. He says in verse 24, then, "There is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil." Now, the word enjoyment there from the ESV is actually a word that says you need to find the good. Not just happiness, find the good. Because not all work brings happiness, but all good work, all work that is beneficial and profitable and godly, there's a goodness to it. I might be out digging a ditch so that pipes can run, so people's toilets can actually flush. Right? We might be out there digging ditches, and I've done those in my life. I've dug ditches that had sewer pipes in them. Sometimes even had sewage in them. I've been in that mess that others could have plenty in their house. It's a good work. But most people, when they approach jobs like that, very often go, well, that's beneath me. There's no job beneath you if it's good and it benefits other people. And if you think a job is beneath you, you need to consider Christ more. He did not think about himself being greater than any lowly job. Anything that's worth doing has a benefit. And we need to find the good in the toil we do. He says, "This also I saw is from God." He says, but part of that benefit is that I can then sit and eat and drink with others. Part of the benefit might simply be that I can provide for myself and provide for my others and my family and have something with which to share. Work is good for us. It stresses us and it's hard for us. And so we have to remember to find the good in it. And he says, "This I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment?" That word enjoyment is actually a different word than the one before. We're talking about find the good. He's saying there that we can be happy. That we can eat and be happy. That is an important good. That we ought to have that heart and that mentality. And when we are serving others, we need to find the good in that. not everybody who needs to be served is easy to serve. Jesus came to serve, didn't he? And especially to the Jewish nation. Were they easy to serve? No, those who he came to serve killed him, mistreated him, spat on him. Treating others and serving others does not always come easy. And so finding the good in it is important. So there's a couple of passages I want to go through today that talk about, it mentions 9 different ways to serve. So we're just talking about ways any of us might be able to serve. And so they're written down for us. I don't think these are the only ways, but they are given to us. And so let's go over to 1 Peter chapter 4 and from 7 through 11. When Peter describes, talked about the end of all things being at hand, in this whole section he's talking about being good stewards of God. And he says, therefore, with the end of all things at hand, be self-controlled, sober-minded for the sake of your prayers. Sober-minded, when we think of sober, we always think of not being under the influence of something that might affect our brains, clear thinking. The term actually, in context, and the way they would understand it, is to think clearly. Isn't really referencing specifically, substances that might affect that, though we certainly wouldn't want to be under the influence of things. But he's telling us to think clearly, to try to think accurately and truly what's real. And he says, above all, keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins. Show hospitality to one another without grumbling. And as I said, being hospitable is not just having people you know over. Hospitality is a very specific Greek word that means to love a stranger. And so it's reaching out, and it's helping people, and it isn't just having people over your house, though that could be one thing you might do, but it's caring for, serving, helping people who you don't know, or maybe you don't know very well. Do we put ourselves out for others, not just the ones that we love and who love us back? He then also says, as each one has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. We're going to look at another passage here and talking about that varied grace. The word grace means to be the gifts of God. God's gifts are multivaried, and none of us have all of them. Paul even refers to the miraculous gifts that he received, like in 1 Corinthians letter, that he received more than most. Right? He had an abundance of gifts. It didn't make him better, and he had to use all of them. But most of us don't have all gifts. But almost all of us have some gifts. In fact, I would say all of us have some gifts. I started thinking, what about that? I was thinking about a friend of mine and their Down syndrome daughter. And I remember when my daughter was little, we were living around, they were good friends of ours, and you think, well, what could she do? She actually was very gifted at bringing joy. She brought joy to everybody around her all the time. And that was a great gift. I was blessed to baptize her in like early 20s, not long before I moved up here. But, and so you think, sometimes people think, well, what can they do? everybody usually can do something. Sometimes it might just be your presence that's important to people. And all of us have something that others don't have. And so I remember, because I remember my friends, when they had, this was their third child who had Down syndrome. And they got really worried about that, as I think any parent would, as they realized that's happening. And the mom especially was worried about it, because she had had a sibling who had mental health issues that created a lot of problems in her family. She was worried that would happen. She had 2 older boys and a young daughter. Her daughter was way more a joy than the 2 older boys. They eventually realized that. They're like, yeah, the boys are good. You know, they're really talented, and the oldest one got lots of degrees, and he did a lot of great stuff, and some of it apparently is not discussable. But anyway, but neither of her boys brought nearly as much joy to the house as her daughter. Brought joy to other people. And sometimes we forget things like that. That how important all of us are. And that's one of the things in Ephesians 4 that we covered a couple weeks ago. Every one of us is part of the whole. And when all of us are doing the little things, the little graces we have, the whole is better for it. And so he says, whoever speaks as one who speaks oracles of God. So if you have the gift of gab, you love to talk. I know some of you out there. You might even think, well, what about you, Roger? Actually, you see me here talking all the time. A lot of people who don't see me, people I know who don't see me here, see me as a very quiet person. Because very often I'm not very talkative. I'm out, playing golf with a bunch of buddies, and I don't talk much. They all talk. They yabber a lot. I'm not that. So time and place, which is a point we're going to get to later. But if you have the gift of talk, make sure you're talking like the Word of God. Share the Word of God with all of those words. He says, as one who serves, so if one of the gifts we have is to serve, do it by the strength that God supplies. So what's the strength God supplies? Well, sometimes we're really strong. I was thinking about it. In fact, Dave and Rich and I have talked about this. The moment we realized when a younger man stepped in so we wouldn't have to carry that heavier weight. Like, wait a second, I'm the person who carries the heavy weights. And I'm being asked to step aside so somebody else can carry it for me so I don't hurt my back. The first time men are kind of put in that position to be not the one who carries and picks up the heavy thing, right? I wasn't asked to go to Ben's house to move the heavy stuff again today. Younger guys were. And so, the strength we have changes from time to time. And that's okay. You do what you're able to do with the strength you have. And he says, the purpose of this is that in everything God may be glorified through Jesus Christ. That's our purpose. We're trying to glorify God, not us. It isn't about us being great or us doing great stuff. It's about us serving a great God who is giving me abilities that I can honor Him with. And He's given me the words and the teachings and the knowledge of these good things that without Him, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't understand. One other passage that talks about the same kinds of things, and I'm going to go through it probably a little bit quicker, but in Romans chapter 12, In Romans 12, starting from 6, going from 6 through 8, something we covered in our Sunday morning class here recently. And he's telling them here in this passage, by the way, that it's all based upon the first couple of verses of this chapter, where he's telling us to offer our bodies a living sacrifice to God. We are no longer offering the carcasses of dead animals on a fire. We are offering our own lives as an offering to God. And one of the ways we do that is described here from 6 through 8. He says, having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let us use them. If prophecy, and that's a miraculous one that God gave to those that gave that gift to. He said, do it in proportion to your faith. He says, if service, very similar to what Peter talked about, if my ability, if the grace given to me is that I can serve others and I can help others, then I need to do that. He says, the one who teaches, in teaching. You might think about teaching, it's like, well, that's just kind of a job. But most of us have known lots of teachers in our lives. And we can kind of look at certain teachers and go, you know, that teacher's gifted at it. They don't just do the job. You're like, they're really good at that job. And sometimes you can kind of see it even when they're younger. Like, wow. It's like, it wasn't just something they learned or they were taught. They had the gift. Well, use the gift to teach. If you have the ability and have the gift to teach, teach. And he says, the one who exhorts. So that means to encourage. Use it to exhort other people. Encourage other people. If you're an encouraging person, encourage other people. He says, the one who contributes gives money. And many of you are awesome at this. This congregation, anytime there's a need, whether it's here, whether it's in another nation, needs arise, people here are very generous. The way we think about it is we're not taking any of it with us, and God is the one who gives all these things to us. And if I have the ability to give, I need to be generous with it. The one who leads, if you have that ability, be a leader. Do it with zeal. Have some real passion about it, some purpose in it. Don't just do it reluctantly, oh, okay, if you have to. Because you might, I don't know, maybe you're that person who other people always want you to kind of take over. And you're like, oh, I don't really want to. Okay, I'll do it anyway, I guess. No. It's a good thing if other people want you to lead. Have some passion and some zeal about it. Now, this last one, talking about these things that are just so important to serving other people, the one who does acts of mercy. The person who can show mercy to other people. It's like, how much do we need sometimes that sense of because so often we feel inadequate. We feel like we're sinners and we fail. And it's so wonderful to have other people demonstrate a real merciful attitude towards us. And he says, if you have the ability to be merciful to people, do it cheerfully. And sometimes, and I know people, you probably all know people who are just so good at cheering other people up. We're so good at encouraging others. And you might look at yourself and go, I'm not really gifted at it. That doesn't mean I can't try to do it, by the way. But he's telling us in this passage that when we have gifts, we need to think soberly how to use them for God's glory. Because it's not about you and me. It's about Him. We're going to stop there today. I appreciate all your time. Appreciate all those who come our way visiting. And if you're here, or if anybody is here today, we're going to sing a song to close out this part of our services this morning. But if you're in need and we can serve you, if we can help you along the way, if you're traveling or if you're one of ours and you're in need and nobody has noticed your need yet, please just, reach out. Doesn't have to do it publicly. You can do that if you'd like, but you can pull me aside later or pull somebody else aside or send us a text, send us give me a call, send me an email. I want to know. And I know others here want to know too. And if you're in need, please reach out to us that we might serve you. Let's go ahead and stand and sing.